All right, let's get started. I'm going to tell you about some general tips and tricks of completing the IELTS test. I'm going to start from the listening, reading, writing, and then speaking. So I hope that you can open the link that I shared with you, the IELTS preparation guide by IDP, one of the owners of the IELTS test. So I hope that you are here because you are thinking of pursuing your next academic degree, which is leading you to take the academic module, not the general training. So if you're going to take the general training, then you're aiming for migrating to that country or working in that country. And I'm going to provide you with some general tips for the academic model, which is intended for those who are thinking of studying or pursuing their higher education overseas. Right, so IELTS academic, it consists of 4 sections, as you may have noticed. The first one is the listening section that lasts for 30 minutes. We have 4 recorded monologues and conversations. After the listening section, the reading section will follow. It will last about 60 minutes, so 1 hour to complete 40 questions actually. And there are 3 reading passages with different tasks, and the texts may include diagrams, graphs, or illustrations. And the texts are taken from books, journal, magazines, and newspapers that are pretty much academic and suitable for your future life of studying overseas. For the writing section, it will last for 60 minutes. You are given 2 tasks basically, and the first task is related to describing or explaining a table, graph, or chart, or a diagram, and you need to write at least 150 words. There is no maximum word, so I would suggest you to write more than 150 words. Say about 200 words would be an ideal number of word counts for writing task 1. And for the second task, which is an argumentative or a descriptive, persuasive task, you're given 40 minutes to complete 250 words or more. And of course, we expect you to write about 300 words because by then it shows that you're able to describe your ideas, to explain your opinions clearly without any difficulties. Well, for the speaking part, it will last between 11 and 14 minutes. It will be a face-to-face interview without disruptions or distractions. So it is very common that you have one IELTS speaking examiner, either in person or online, of course. It includes short questions and for the first part, and for the second part, you'll be asked to speak at length for about 2 minutes about a familiar topic. And the third part will be a structured discussion. So of course, as the name suggests, it's a discussion, so you're expected to elaborate your answers. So how is IELTS scored? The highest score of the IELTS test is 9, and the lowest would be 0, of course. And generally speaking, the research published by the official website of the IELTS, most of the test takers in the whole world have the score 6 to 6.3 or 6.5 for listening, reading, writing, and speaking. So writing and speaking may be lower than 6.5, but it's around that score. So if you are aiming for the score 7, I hope that you want to listen to the tips that I'm going to tell you now, or higher, 7 or higher, of course. All right, for the listening test, it consists of 4 sections. The first section is a conversation between 2 people set in an everyday social context. So it's a conversation about accommodation, a conversation about opening a bank account, or a conversation between 2 people talking about transportation, for example. While section 2 is still related to everyday social context. It's not yet academic, but it's in a form of monologue. For example, a speech about local facilities or about arrangements for meals during a conference. So it's a monologue, but the topic is still about daily context. Section 3 and 4 are more academic, was Section 3 is a conversation between 2 to 4 people set in an educational or training context. For example, a university tutor and a student discussing an assignment, or a group of people planning a project. So it's very relevant to your future career as international student, where you need to um, discuss things that are related to your study, of course. And for the last section is a talk, which is a lecture, like when you're attending a class and you are listening a tutor, just like what you're doing at the moment with me now. I'm talking and you're listening to me explaining about things. So some tips of completing the IELTS listening test. First of all, at the beginning of each section, read the questions for that section carefully before the recording starts. This will help you to follow the recording and identify the answers. In other words, you are expected to be ahead of the audio. Don't let you get left behind by the audio. So how to do that? We need to be one step farther than the audio by understanding what the questions will be. And we're expected to be able to predict what the answers. So that's way you are ahead of the audio. But if you rely heavily on the audio and the speed is reliant upon the audio, that will make you difficult to catch up with the answers, like answering the questions, okay? So try to be ahead of the audio. After completing a section, it is better to look ahead and read the questions for the next section than to worry about the last section. So when you're doing a listening test and you get stuck in one number, it's better to focus on the following questions or the following items rather than focusing on the number that you get stuck with, because time is very precious in the listening IELTS test. If you keep on thinking of one number, then it is very likely that you will be left out for the following numbers. So in this case, focus on the next section or the next numbers and do not worry much about the previous sections. You can always go back later on when you have some time to check your answers, okay? Point number 3, you'll sometimes have a list of options to choose from as answers. The possible answers may be listed in alphabetical order and not necessarily in the order you will hear them. So it is a misconception if you think that multiple choice test, the options there are mentioned one by one in a chronological order. No. So one thing for sure, that all the options are going to be read out loud. So in this case, by understanding which sections or which options say about which topics will help you a lot in determining which one is the most correct option, which is the answer, of course. And don't let yourself get distracted because the options will be spoken, okay? So almost all the options will be included in the audio, and it is our job to find one that is the most correct out of the available options. Be careful to note word limits. This is very, very important. If you have maximum one word or no more than one word, it means that if the requirement is one word, even though you answer 2 words and one of the words is correct, it will be considered wrong. For example, the correct answer is abstract, and then you answer it with abstract illustration. Yes, the word abstract is there, but the requirement is to write one word only. So in this case, abstract would be the only correct option or answer. If there's an instruction, write no more than 2 words. Writing more than 2 words will mean you will receive no marks at all for your answer, even if some of the words are correct, just like what I explained. So please follow carefully the number of words, okay? The last tip here, try to listen for keywords or synonyms, words that have the same or nearly the same meaning as another word, from the question to help you identify the answer. For example, in the recording, you might hear, she likes going to the gym and playing tennis. On your answer sheet or screen, this could appear as she is an active person. So we do not match word by word, but we focus more on the meaning, okay, or the answer to the question. If the answer is, you know, she is an active person, and you hear that she goes to gym and then she plays tennis, it shows that the person does not have a sedentary lifestyle. The person is very active, so it has the same meaning. So the option of she is an active person would be the correct option. Before we move on to the reading part, I would like to remind you, apart from the number of words, is to use the correct capitalization, like capital letters for names, right? For example, the name of the street is Grand Avenue. Of course, you want to use the capital G for Grand and capital A for Avenue because it's the name of a street, right? And if it is the name of a person, yeah, like John Smith, then J and S should also be written in capital letters. This also applies to the name of months, names of rooms. For example, the name of the room is West Wing. So capital W for West and capital W for Wing should be applied there. So if you don't want to deal with capital letters, you can write all the answers using capital letters. For example, the phrase West Wing, so you want to use capital W, capital E, capital S, capital T, space, capital W, capital I, capital N, and capital G. So everything capitalized. So by then you don't need to worry about capitalization. But in general, S endings and capital letters are pretty much problematic for some students, okay? All right, so there are many types of questions for the listening, from multiple choice until sentence completion, that we will discuss in our meeting, listening, and reading classes, okay? Now let's focus on the reading test. You have 60 minutes to complete. So basically there are 3 sections. So each section consists of 13 to 14 numbers, of course. And one section should be completed within 20 minutes to have a full 60-minute mark. The texts are all real and are taken from books, magazines, and newspapers, so they are real articles. They have been written for a non-specialist audience and are on academic topics of general interest, which means you do not need specialist knowledge to do well. So if the topic is related to space engineering, you don't need to know much about aviation, for example, but because the content knowledge is not helpful in answering the reading, but your reading skill is very much helpful. So we learn about skimming and scanning to reduce the time of completing the test. That will be very helpful for doing the reading part. The texts are appropriate to and accessible to candidates entering undergraduate or postgraduate courses or seeking professional registration. So again, this is not a general English class. This is an academic class, especially the IELTS academic module, okay? You're expected to be ready for the academic world. Texts range from the descriptive and factual to the discursive and analytical. So we have a variety of text types. And the texts may contain non-verbal materials such as diagrams, graphs, or illustrations. If texts contain technical terms, then a simple glossary is provided. For example, they use a term called collocation, then the word collocation will be explained in the reading test to make sure that you understand the reading passage in general. So some tips for the reading, for completing the reading section. First is to improve your performance in the reading test. You need to practice reading a variety of English texts. This will help you develop the ability to read quickly. So skimming, scanning, we'll practice that. We do not read in details unless we are looking for the answer for a specific sentence or two. Read every question carefully first before reading the passages. So if you understand the questions, that will be very helpful in finding the keywords, and then the keywords should be looked for in the passage. So that's how we do that. This will make it easier for you to find the answer, okay, by understanding the questions. It's a good modality before looking for the answers, of course. Underline possible answers as you go. In computer delivered IELTS, you can highlight or make notes on a section of text. So in the IELTS computer delivered test, yes, you can highlight and you can even make notes on the screen. When you come to reading the passage, excuse me, read it quickly the first time in order to get a general idea of what it's about. Don't worry about words you do not understand. Then read each question again to remind yourself which parts of the passage you will need to read again in detail. So if you do not understand one word or the vocabulary, it's totally fine. It's pretty normal because the words are pretty academic, for example. Then focus on what you are looking for. Okay, what are the keywords that you are looking for in the reading passage that will lead you to the actual answers. The reading passages always contain the information you need to answer the question. You won't have to use your own knowledge of a topic. So we usually just transform or transpose or transfer the answers from the reading passage to the answer sheet. Okay, so we do not even need to change the parts of speech like adjective to adverb, adjectives to nouns. No, we just need to find the sentence and locate which word is the actual answer and just copy it. If you're copying words from a question or reading passage to use in your answer, remember that your spelling must be accurate. So spelling is extremely important, but it doesn't really matter whether you want to use the American English spelling or British English spelling or Australian English spelling. In computer delivered IELTS, you can use Control C and Control V on your keyboard to move your answers to the answer box, reducing room for mistakes. Again, because the answers may just be taken from the passage, you can just copy and paste. But in the computer delivered test, you cannot use Control F, which is to help you to find the words or the keywords because that function is disabled. So there are different kinds of question types that we will discuss in our class, okay? So make sure that you follow each class because we're going to talk about it one by one. If you want to read from here first, it's totally fine, but due to the time limit, I'll just move on to the next section, which is writing. So in the writing test, we're given 1 hour to complete 2 tasks. There are 2 parts, okay? And they should be written in an academic, semi-formal, or neutral style. So more of a academic and formal, I would say. So the first task is a descriptive task, is like what I mentioned earlier. You are presented with a graph, table, chart, or diagram and are asked to summarize and report the information in your own words. So this is very important, in your own words. So if you use some words taken from the question, those words will not be considered as your answers. Even if you have some repeated words, those repeated words will be considered as one word. So this is why we encourage you to write more than 150 words to avoid any repeated words so that you won't get any penalty. You may be asked to select and compare data. Okay, so summarizing, not describing everything in details, no, because if you focus too much on detail, it will be an auto 5 because the task is clear to select and report or compare data. You can also describe stages of a process of a thermal energy or geothermal energy or hydroelectric power, something like that. So you need to describe the process, but in your own words. Describe an object or how something works. So that's how we will deal with task 1. For task 2, we are asked to write an essay in response to a point of view. It's more of an argumentative or persuasive essay. And task 2 contributes twice as much as task 1 to the writing score. So task 2 accounts for 67% of your score, or your writing score, while task 1 accounts for 33%. So this is why it's reasonable to say that 40 minutes should be given for task 2 and 20 minutes should be given for task 1. The issues raised are of general interest to, suitable for, and easily understood by test takers entering undergraduate or postgraduate studies or seeking professional registration. So the topics may be varied. It can be in relation to psychological development. It can be social phenomenon, for example, of AI, for example, or the role of education or punishment in a family, for example, the kind of thing. So there's no right or wrong, but as long as you can argue well and you can provide your arguments chronologically and neatly, then you'll all be good. In your writing test, there are no right or wrong answers, or there are no wrong opinions. The examiners are assessing how well you can use English to report information and express ideas. In this case, one indicator would be not to repeat the same word more than once. Actually, there are 4 criteria in assessing your writing: vocabulary, grammar, test achievement or test response, and coherence and cohesion. We'll talk about it in the writing and speaking class, but for now, for the pretest, we hope that you understand that we try to use formal academic English and we try not to repeat the same word, and we try to avoid simple sentences. We focus on complex sentences or compound sentences. But if you think simple sentences might do the trick, it's fine too. Tip number 2 is to analyze the questions carefully to make sure your answer addresses all the points covered by the question. Many of my previous students do not read the questions carefully, and they end up not answering the full question and answering only the first question. So in this case, try to understand the questions first, and it is almost always that you need to explain and give an example. Okay, so give your answers, explain your answers, and give examples. Examples can be from research study or can be from your own experience, but it is suggested to have more academic evidence. Point number 3, in writing, you need to notice the minimum word limit. There is no maximum word limit, but there is minimum word limit. If you write less than 150 words for task 1 and less than 250 for task 2, you will lose marks. Okay, so I would say -1 for the overall score. You don't want that, right? So please make sure that you write around 200 words for task 1 and 300 words for task 2. That amount of words is suitable for a high score and suitable for explaining in details and providing examples. One benefit of taking the computer delivered test is that the screen will show your word count automatically. If you're taking the paper base, unfortunately, you need to count the words one by one. Be careful to use your own words because the examiner will not include words copied from the question in the word count, just like what I said. If you use some words from the questions, then those words are not counted. So in this case, it is safe to write more than the required minimum word limit to avoid this kind of incident. You must write both your answers in full, not in note form or in bullet points. Okay, so if you have bullet points as an initial idea of jotting ideas is fine, but you need to elaborate your bullet points into paragraphs or sentences. You must arrange your ideas in paragraphs to show the examiner that you're able to organize your main and supporting points. So usually the rule is answer, explanation, then example. Answer, explanation, example. You can have 4 to 5 paragraphs depending on the questions, but usually we have 4 paragraphs in general. So this is an example of the question, and the job is to summarize facts or figures from graphic information. So the job is to summarize, not to explain everything in details, okay? This is also an example of writing task 2. We have agree or disagree kind of question, problem solution, advantages and disadvantages, discussion, and we will talk about that later in detail in the writing class. Moving on to the last section, which is the speaking test, one of my favorite sections because my dissertation is related to the IELTS speaking test. The speaking test is a short face-to-face interview with an examiner that lasts between 11 and 14 minutes. There are 3 parts to complete and they become progressively more challenging. Okay. So in part 1, it will last for 4 to 5 minutes. The examiner will start by introducing him or herself and asking you to state your name and show your ID and so forth. And they will ask you similar familiar topics like music, cooking, weather, movies, and that kind of thing. Okay. Some tips to complete this first part is to be prepared to answer questions using different verb tenses and forms because we want you to get the level to the expert user, and expert users use different kinds of tenses and vocabularies. If you listen carefully to what the examiner asks, it will help you formulate your answer using the appropriate tense. For example, if the question is, did you like the same movies when you were a child? Of course, did and then were, right? These two indicate past tense. So the answer would be, when I was a child, I liked cartoons more because blah, blah, blah. Okay, we refer to the past. Don't give 1 or 2 word answers. Don't just say yes or no. What's your name? Please introduce yourself. Then you can just say, my name is Andreas, and that's it. So explain more. My name is Andreas Susanto. You can call me Andreas. The reason of me taking this IELTS test today is to prepare for my scholarship requirement that is due next week, for example, and I need to score 6 or 6.5 to get to the university that I want, for example. Okay, so that's one way of answering. Give at least 1 or 2 sentences, and this is your chance to show off your English, and holding back is not going to help your score. So we know that your English is great, so this is the time for you to shine and show us what kind of vocabularies you can master, what kind of pronunciation that you are able to articulate, and stressing and something like that. Prepare for the section by reviewing about about work, school, home, hobbies, weather, and so on. So in part 1 is pretty general, and it's a warm-up activity that will help you get tuned into the English speaking mode. Part 2 is called individual long term. So you will be given a cue card, a topic on a cue card, and you'll be given a piece of paper and a pencil. Okay, on the card you will see the speaking prompt and some points you can cover in your talk relating to this. So the question might be, describe a beautiful place to visit in your city. Okay, where it is, how to get there, what there is to do when you're there, and explain why you recommend this place. You have 1 minute to prepare. Think about idiomatic expressions, advanced grammar, advanced vocabulary. Then you'll be asked to speak for 2 minutes, okay? Some tips for doing well in part 2 is to take notes. The initial thoughts you jot down will help you remember what you have to say. So jot down some ideas or some possible idioms that you want to use in your speaking. Try to structure your talk with a simple beginning, middle, and end. So a good speaking should have a good start, a good body of speaking or content, and a good closing. You can use keywords from the prompt to form an introductory sentence. Okay, I would like to talk to you today about, okay, and I'm going to tell you about, for example, and so on. Extend each part of your answer with some details. So again, this is a speaking test. You're expected to speak a lot. So in this case, you have 2 minutes to fill. Okay, you need to speak for 2 minutes in full. Okay, don't speak less than 2 minutes because that will reduce your score. Use the full 2 minutes. Practice talking in front of a mirror or on a subject for 2 minutes so you get the sense of the timing, okay? During the speaking test, sometimes you will be stopped by the examiner because the time is completed. So don't worry because you will not get any penalty. Part 3 is a two-way discussion. It will last for 4 to 5 minutes. The questions in part 3 will be loosely connected to the topic that you spoke about in part 2, so it's pretty related to part 2 questions. And they will be more complex and more abstract. So the concept may be the same about a beautiful place to visit. Then you'll be asked about what do you think uh, your city is, your hometown is. You can talk about whether it is beautiful or not, and so on. You need to be able to express, justify your opinions, analyze, discuss, and speculate on given subjects. If your long turn was about a beautiful place to visit in your city, this section might begin by talking about beautiful places, and the first question, might be, do you think it's important to maintain beautiful places in cities? Why or why not, for example? Then you will be invited to speak more, and you're able to talk about abstract ideas versus personal topics in part 1 and part 2. So part 1 and part 2 are personal topics, but part 3 is more abstract. Tips for doing well in part 3 is to support and extend your answers. Okay? Do not just say yes and no, but expand your answers so that they are good enough as responses for part 3. State your opinions clearly and provide examples and reasoning as you talk. You do not have to believe your own opinion, or you might not have one. So turn to what you think others are saying about the subject and create a line of reasoning from that. So if you find it hard about a topic, think about what other people might think. What might your brother might think if it is about robots? What about um, household, uh, domestic chores, for example? What would you do if you're in their shoes, for example? The more you say, the more you show how you can use English to communicate. So it's an English test. We are testing your English, not your knowledge. Avoid long pauses. It's okay to pause to think, but don't let too much time pass without speaking. So pauses are okay if you finish a sentence, but if you pause in the middle of a sentence, it's a signal that your fluency is not at your best, for example. If you need to think, you can use phrases. For example, that's an excellent question. Or you can use, where should I start? Let me see. Just to kill the time that will help you get some more ideas or vocabularies to speak. Ask for clarification. Be sure you understand the question before you answer so that your response is relevant. It's okay to say something like, I'm sorry, can you please repeat that? Pardon me, do you mean blah, blah, blah? Paraphrase or explain what you are trying to say instead of giving up if you forget a word in English. Some questions may sound the same or similar because the question is intended for testing your ability in paraphrasing or using synonyms. So if you don't know the word, you can describe the word, for example. There's a tip given here, but basically we hope that you use different words for different answers or for different questions. So that's that. There are some resources that you want to check at the beginning of the guide. There are also some tips to help you succeed on the D-Day. You can arrive early, you can check in your personal items, ID check, breaks, asking for help, and what you would do at the end of the test, and so on, okay? So you may want to check again this document, especially at the top. I think there are some links to free practices like this one, okay? IELTSessentials.com. That will be very helpful for you to practice, okay? So, yeah, thank you. I think that's the tips from me. And if you have questions, shoot me a message, raise your hand, or put your answers in the chat box, okay? Thank you.